It's Thursday, April the 22nd. Lake level is 914 3/4, which is a few inches below winter pool, down a couple inches from what it was last week. Water temperature's actually gone down a little bit. It's, mid 50s to 60 degrees. The fish were really starting to bite really good last weekend. There was a ton of fish caught in the tournaments last weekend, and you could catch them on a little bit of everything. You'll see I got stuff scattered all over the place here, but it got real cold, and fish are still up there spawning, but it seems like it's slowed down some of the more active bites, but we're still catching them. But it looks like the sun's going to come out and warm things up. That's going to help up a bunch. But with that being said, most of the fish up there spawning, you can either sight fish for them, or what I've been doing is I've been catching a lot on finesse baits in the areas where they're bedding. One of my number one baits, I fished tournaments this weekend and had limits by about 9 o'clock each day, and my partners did as well, and then would go looking for bigger fish. But anyways, most of them fish were coming on a fluke and a Cinco. And I've been fishing a Zoom fluke, also a caffeine, Strike King caffeine shad. But the shad colors seem to be working the best for me, and I have been trying like the watermelon red, or this one here is a Mardi Gras. And the way I've been rigging that up is with a 5/0 hook. And this is the 5-inch caffeine shad, and I'm putting a little lead weight right here. You can see, I'll pull it out so you can see. You can buy these at the tackle store, or you can use a little finish nail, but the lead has got more weight than like what a finish nail's got. But that's helping the bait sink, get down there a little bit deeper. When the fish were more active, it didn't seem like I had to put any weight in it because they were coming up for it. But since it's got cold, it seems like I've had to add a little weight where the bait sinks, gets down there a little bit deeper. And, a lot of these banks I'm fishing, a lot of times it's where you got that big ledge rock. The fish will come up out of the shadows of the ledges. Some of it's on flat gravel, and I'm just going in areas where I think the fish are spawning, and I'm actually visually seeing a lot of beds. I'm not so much sight fishing the fluke. I'm just trying to stay back off and throw it in the areas where they're bedding. Another bait we're throwing in the same area. We're just kind of mixing it up. Seems like they bite that fluke pretty good till about 9:30, 10 o'clock. Then I've got to go to a finesse bait, either a Ned rig, and I've been using like either a green pumpkin or a dirt, and 1/8 ounce to 3/16, 5 fish ultimate Ned jig head. Or I've been throwing this one with a little bit of orange in it too. I think it's called a Bama craw. But I've been throwing the Neds and a little split shot. And, I think a person can throw a tube, you can throw a shaky head. Some of the guys in the tournament, my co-anglers, were catching them behind me on like a shaky head with a Cinco or just a trick worm. But I've been fishing a 6 or 8 pound line, number 3 split shot, 1 or 2/0 hook, and either watermelon red French fry, watermelon red fish doctor, or green pumpkin. And just fishing it on the bottom, just like a Ned rig, just fishing it real slow in the same areas I'm throwing the fluke where I think the fish are bedding. Now, I was starting to get a good topwater bite. Each day I caught a few fish on topwater, and those fish were a little bit bigger fish. And I think, those fish they were pre-spawn fish that were out over the timber in about 15 to 18 foot, which I think you can also throw a jerk bait in them same areas. But the topwater baits that were working good for me, I couldn't get bit on like a walking bait, like a spook style bait or sexy dog. It seemed like it had to be a real slow moving bait. This is a new Spro. It's called a Zero Minnow, and this is a Berkeley bait. It's a knockoff off the Cotton Cordell Redfin. But it seems like I've got to reel them real slow, and the fish aren't coming up and blasting it. They're just kind of coming up and sucking it in. But the one thing I found, if I get a fish that would boil on it, keep your fluke handy and ready to throw. Because if they would miss the top water, I could throw the fluke out there in that same area and usually catch that fish 99% of the time on the fluke. Once the fish would show himself to, where I knew where he was at. And there have been some fish schooling too. It seemed like, to me, down lake area, for some reason, it's a lot tougher for me. Water temperature seems like it's about the same down by the dam as it is in Kimberling City or up in the White and the James. But the bite seems a lot more active to me up in the James Rivers, like say from Ants Creek on up in the White from Baxter up to Shell Knob. It just seems like you can catch more fish in that area. The more I get down towards the dam, the quality's a little better, but the bites seem like they're a lot less. You'll see I got my Bass Mafia, what they call it, money bag. But it's a really good way. I've got like all my flukes, all my Cincos stuff in there. If you're doing any canoeing or kayaking, it's got a Ziploc on it where it'll seal up watertight. Jumping into somebody else's boat, throwing a tackle pack together, it's really a slick way to put some tackle together. But another thing I've been throwing on that, along with that Cinco, along with the fluke, is a Cinco. And I'm rigging it up the same way, using the same hook, a 5/0 hook. And I'm throwing either a Yamamoto Cinco or a Big Bites stick worm. And it seems like green pumpkin, watermelon black, watermelon red seems to be working well. And both of these baits, I'm just kind of dropping them until they get just about out of sight. And then twitching them a few times. Last week I talked a little bit about wacky rigging the stick worm, but it seemed like for some reason this weekend I couldn't get, bit that much dead stick in it, but if I was moving it like a fluke, I could get, a few more bites on it. But the fish are in all three stages. I'm starting to see a little bit of fry, meaning that some of the fish have spawned out. But, a lot of the baits around the areas where they're bedding this time of year, it seems like a lot of creature baits. Like if you're throwing a shaky head like I've got a wobble head here somewhere. But if I'm throwing a wobble head or shaky head, it seems like a, baby brush hog or like a biffle bug or a beaver style bait. It's working a little bit better for me than say like a skirted jig with the trailer. I think once they get through spawning, the jig will come into play a lot more than, like a Texas rigged creature bait. But, the rest of the fish should come in to spawn in the next week or so. We got a moon coming up, supposed to be back up in the 80s next week. There's still a swim bait bite too. Some of the better fish I caught in the tournament, a lot of them fish I caught up there on the fluke were, 2 1/4 pounders. But I went out looking for pre-spawn fish because I feel those fish are going to be a little bit bigger, which they were. And I was out there on like a lot of them gravel points and about 20 foot throwing a little swim bait. This is a 3.2. And I was mixing it up with like a 4-inch swim bait as well. And a lot of those fish were smallmouths and big fat Kentuckys. But I just couldn't find very many of them. I had to fish, 3 or 4 points, maybe 5 points to get 1 or 2 bites. And an underspin will work out there in the same areas. Now I did, live scope several of them fish. I started to see more fish out there suspended out there off them points than I had been. The last couple of weeks it seemed like the bait had to be right on the bottom to get bit. But this past weekend, it seemed like I get the bait down about 8 to 12 feet over that 20 to 25 foot. And you could actually see them out there on the Garmin live scope. And you could catch a few more. But just a lot of different things happening as far as, how to catch them. And it's going to do nothing but get better. Look for the topwater bite to get better and better as well. I think that cold that came in really shut that down. The fish bit pretty good the day that it was snowing, and then the day afterwards we had kind of like a bluebird conditions, wind and Water temperature dropped a couple degrees, and it got a lot slower, but I think that's going to turn around, pick back up. So, till next week, good luck, good fishing.